Hey everyone, and welcome to a new video. It's Federico here. In this video we're going to see how to create a video collage using the MSP object. Now in this demo I'm using an abstraction which I'm not gonna use in the actual tutorial. This is not at all necessary, it's just to have it a bit more neat. So if this is interesting for you, keep watching, and without any further ado, let's jump right into it. So let's first create a JIT world, which we'll call my world. This is the name of our rendering context. And now let's give it full-scale anti-aliasing. Let's give it floating 1. Let's give it enable 1. So when we start the patch, the world will be already activated. Let's give it some size of the window. Let's make it 960 by 540, which, if I'm not wrong, is the full HD divided by 2. So this will have the same proportions as a full HD window. And this should be it. Maybe let's set also raise color to 0 for the background, so black. Nice. Okay, for the moment this should be it. Let's create a JIT FPS GUI to check our frame rate. And let's now create a JIT movie, which we will use to project our movies on top of a jit.gl.meshwarp object. So this is going to draw to my world. This attribute is optional because JIT movie is going to automatically find JIT world, the rendering context. But if we want to be sure that it's rendering to the right context, we can write it manually. Then I like to put volume 0 because I don't want to hear the sound, the eventual sound coming out from movies. Cool. So let's now get movie. I have a bunch of videos which I downloaded from Pexel, which is a very nice website. I will put the link in the description where you can download videos. So I will drag a video and drop it on the JIT movie object. We can check with a JIT window if it's actually playing. Cool. Automatically playing. Oh, I forgot something. As you can see, this is a matrix cable, but we want to output textures because this is going to be much more efficient. So I have to tell to JIT movie, I have to give it the output texture 1. As you can see, it now becomes a blue cable, and I have to reset the movie inside this object. And as you can see now, is outputting a texture. So let's now create the jit.gl.meshwarp object. And we can give it also the draw to attribute to my world to be sure it is going to render in the correct context. And as you can see, it appears here. Let's connect it now to the output of JIT movie. Cool. Now, as you can see, the jit.gl.meshwarp by default is squared. So it's actually not following the proportion of the input video. So if we want the proportions of the input video to be correct, so I assume this is a full HD video, so we should have the ratio between the X and the Y dimensions should be 1.777. So if we want the jit.gl.meshwarp follows this ratio, so there is an attribute in jit.gl.meshwarp which is called lock to aspect. So if we say lock to aspect and then we give it the number 1 with a toggle like that, it will set the aspect ratio of the input movie to its original aspect ratio. So the movie looks now correct. Cool. Okay, so if you're not familiar with MSP, you can see that we have these big circles which we can use to scale. And if this is set to lock to aspect, it will always remain with it will always scale using the correct proportions. And if we take away the lock to aspect, you can see that it will we can scale it as we want. And then we have these smaller points which we can move to the form the video. This is the essence of how MSP works. So actually start from scratch. We can send a reset message to MSP if we want to reset all the modifications that we did. And it will also reset the lock to aspect because the lock to aspect is kind of a special attribute. You have to reset it again and this will capture the proportions of the input video and set it as the proportions of the mesh. Right, so let's now go into mask mode. So let's create a message here, let's say mask mode $1. If we go in mask mode, we can start to mask around, we can start to mask the part of the video which we don't want to see. Now, if we go into mask mode, it should create a mask. If it doesn't work, it's actually a bug. So what you can do is actually delete the MSP, recreate it, do everything that we already did, and go into mask mode, and then it should work. Unfortunately, this is a bug. It's going to be solved soon. But for the moment, you can experience sometimes this will not work. So let's actually create a message here for the recall the size of the window for Jit world. In case we lose the size of the window, we want to have it back. Okay, cool. So now this is a mask. If I press Ctrl plus drag, and in this blue center vertex, I can move it around. And if I move around these yellow vertices, these yellow points, I can start to mask the object. If I shift click on the edges of the mask, I can create some more vertices, which I can then use to further define the mask that I want. So I'm going to do it. I'm probably going to speed up the video at this point. Okay, so this seems to be pretty good. So now that we created our mask, we can go here, create another message and say apply mask. So if I now click this toggle, you can see that the mask is applied. If I want to get out of mask mode, I just need to untoggle that. And as you can see, it will show it will actually show first the mesh. So if I click somewhere empty, this will disappear. Cool. Otherwise, I can also use the message show UI. And if I say show UI 0, this is going to disappear. So if you find yourself that you have the mesh visible and you don't want to have it, you just can say show UI 0, and this is disappearing. And this will not show the UI anymore. So even if you click on the mesh, it will not show it. So let's now move our owl somewhere on the scene, maybe down there. Cool. And let's say we are satisfied with what we did. We want to save our carefully crafted mask. So what I'm going to do is to create a pattr storage. And let's give it a name. Let's call it video collage. And if we visualize the storage window, you can see that automatically it recognizes the MSP. And that's because if you open the MSP patcher, you can see that there is a pattr object called MW. And this is actually identified by this pattr storage. So if we want to save that, we could actually create a preset object and use it as an interface for the pattr storage. So let's go in the inspector of this preset object. And on the pattr storage attribute, let's say, how did we call it? Video underscore collage. Okay, so now this will be the interface for that pattr storage. So if I now store the current preset and I go here, you can see that this is saved as a dictionary. So if I now would move the owl somewhere, where the MSP somewhere else, and I will click again on the preset, you can see that it will recall the preset. Even if I kind of deform the mesh or the mask, and then I recall the preset, you can see that it's still all good working. We just need to tell it again, apply mask, exit from mask mode. So this seems to work. So this is our first video. If we are satisfied and we don't want to by mistake modify our carefully crafted mesh or mask, we can say lock UI. And if we try to modify this mesher, it will say jit.gl.meshwarp is locked, and we cannot actually modify it. Okay, cool. So let's now create another one. So let's actually copy this whole thing that we did. And let's input another video. And here is my camel. So let's say here again, lock to aspect. Let's scale it a bit down. Let me make the window a bit bigger, but still maintaining the correct proportion. So I'm pressing shift and dragging. So let's go into mask mode and create a mask for this camel. As you can see, the shape now it's a bit more complex, so we will probably need more masks. By the way, if you don't remember how am I creating the mask, the keys that I'm pressing, if you go in the help file and you go into mask mode, there is a whole explanation here. So you have it all written down there. So let's go on masking our camel. Let's keep adding some more vertices. As you can see, at this point, I'm kind of a problem because this leg, it will go out of the mask. If I will keep creating points here, you can see that it will overlap with other points, and this will then mask the wrong part. So this is how it will look like. I could move the center of my mask somewhere else, so that it will not overlap. But if I want to do it kind of a bit more nicely, I can create another mask. So I just shift and double click, always in mask mode, and now I can use another mask. So always on the edges, double click and shift. And unfortunately, there is not like snap to the point function for the moment. Something that could be added in the future, actually. As you can see, I just deleted my mask. And normally I can Command Z that, but for some reason I cannot Command Z a mask that has been deleted. So I have to remake it from scratch. I think I will speed up the video at this point. Okay, this seems pretty good. So let's go on here with this part of the body. Let's create another mask here for the head. Let me actually save here. So if I delete something by mistake, I can always get back to the previous preset. Nice. And it's a lot of manual work, I will say. It's nothing really magic about it. You just need to spend the time and craft your mask by hand. And this looks good. Let's create the final mask here for the head. Hopefully it's the final one. No, I think we need another one. So let me add it here for the head. Don't forget to save often. This is very important. If I delete a point by mistake, I can Command Z and recreate it. Okay, cool. I think I'm going to be good with that. Let's apply the mask. Cool, and that's our camel. Let's get out of mask mode. Let's bring it maybe right here. Cool. Let's not show the UI. Let's actually save that. So shift click on the preset object. And let's maybe get like a background. So let me copy again this whole thing. We could put those things into a sub pattr, or we could make an abstraction out of this. I will leave you this as an exercise for you, or maybe I will do it in a future video. For the moment, let's just go on like this, lock to aspect. Okay, so as you can see now, this video, the sky video, is covering the other videos. So there is an attribute for Meshwarp called layer. So we can set the layer for the Meshwarp. And we want this one to be behind the others, so we just make it a negative number, like -1. Cool. We don't want to show the UI. Let's save that as well. Okay, cool. So as you can see, the mask is not super smooth. Unfortunately, there is no like feather or smoothing feature at the moment. So round shapes are not super, not going to get super good. So yeah, let's try to now animate our camel and make it move from left to right. So we can set the position attribute of Meshwarp, attach this to Meshwarp. So if I set the position here for the X and the Y, there is not zeta because this is just a 2D. Meshwarp is just 2D. Let's bring it down to like -0409. And then we can modify its X position to move around in the scene. Okay, so let's use jit time. This will give us a stream of increasing numbers and is connected to the jit world. So when we stop the jit world, this will actually stop, right? And then we can say like modulo 2. So these numbers will only go between 0 and 2 or 1.999. And then we can say like -1. Oops. -1, so they will go between -1 and 1. So if we try to attach this here now, you can see that it's working, but it's going backwards. So let's actually multiply this by -1 to reverse the movement. Right. If we want to have it completely disappearing from the window, we should make this bigger than 1. So let's, for example, multiply it by 1.5. Whoops. So now it will go. Oh, let's actually say multiply by 3 dot, otherwise it's not going to be a floating number. Right, and if we want to have it going a bit slower, we can set the speed of jit time to be a slower values lower than 1, right? So 0.2, for example, and we have it moving, right? So that's all I wanted to show you for the moment. Let's stop the time. Other things we could do is to, for example, distort the video using the actual points of the mesh. Let's, for example, increase the dimension of the mesh of the MSHWRP by making the mesh dim. Oh, it's actually not mesh dim. It's called mesh dim without underscore. So by making the mesh dim, by changing the mesh dim attribute, right? Cool. And then we could like distort different parts of the mesh. We could even animate those movements. We're not gonna do it now. I do it in the patch that I'm sharing on Patreon. So if you're curious on how to do that, you can check that. But more than that, it's that probably a different system for moving the vertices is going to be included in MSHWRP in the future. So yeah, stay tuned for that. Now, there's one last thing I want to try, which is to close the patch, reopen it and see if everything is working correctly. So let's close that. So just reopen the patch. Okay, if we now try to restore the state of the patch as it was before, of course the videos are not loaded. So if we load again the video of the owl here, and then we say we load again the preset because it has to set the lock aspect to 1, and then we say apply mask, then this will work. Apply mask, unfortunately, is not saved with the dictionary, saved by the pattrstorage and MSHWRP. So if we take a look at this dictionary, the JSON file, you can see that it saves a bunch of attributes for each MSHWRP object, but apply mask is not there. It's there in max 8.5.6, so wait for the next beta release, and then this will be fixed. So you don't have to actually manually toggle apply mask. But for the moment, let's just attach load mesh 1. So this will automatically apply the mask. And the thing now is that we don't have a way to recall the actual movie file for the JIT movie object. So what we can do is to create a pattr object and set auto restore maybe to 0. Let's give it a name like movie 1. And let's create then a drop file. This is the drop file object, which we can use to drop file inside it, and this will give us the path of that file, and we send it to the pattr object. So let's drop inside here the file, the owl file. So if we now go into the storage window here, you can see that there is a movie. And let me actually save that. And then you can see that now it contains the actual file name. So if I send a bang to this path, I should get out the name of the file. Great. So let's say prepend read. And it should then go inside the JIT movie object. I will just load now another video inside here. And if I recall the preset, it will now load the previous movie. Great. So let's now try to close again the patch, reopen it and see if this actually works and reloads the actual movie file. So as you can see, when we close the patch, it will prompt us to save the dictionary from the pattrstorage. This is the save mode that I chose. It's one of the possible ways you can save the dictionaries. Otherwise, you can save it every time you save the patch. There are a bunch of ways you can do that. Is in the save mode attribute of pattrstorage. So I'm going just to save that, replace the old one, and I just reopen the patch. And if I click on this, as you can see, it will reload the actual video. Cool. Let's actually click 2 times because the first time it doesn't have the lock to aspect set to 1. So this is kind of another bug that should be fixed. But yeah, that's it. Let's do that for the other files as well, for the other MSHWRPs as well. Connect is here. Drop the camels. Recall the preset. Apply mask. Cool. And let's do it for the final MSHWRP, for the sky, lock to aspect, and that's it. Let's save this. Oh, we should actually change the name of these pattr objects. So this will be movie 2, and this will be movie 3. And now we should actually redrop the videos. Cool, save it. Open the storage window to check everything is correct, and everything seems to be correct. So great. That's how we can start to create a video collage using MSHWRP. So you can use that object not only for video mapping, but also in more creative ways, like to create some video collages. Unfortunately, for the moment, there is no mask feather, there is no mask smoothing, but I'm pretty sure this is all coming up in the near future. So I hope this inspired you to play around with this object. Thank you very much for following this crazy video, and I hope to see you in the next one. If you want to download this patch, you can get it from my Patreon, together with the first patch I showed at the beginning of this tutorial. In this way, you will support the channel and get access to hundreds of patches which I shared during the years. Thanks a lot again. I will see you in the next video. Have fun. Ciao.